なに走るの？やれるはずなかった。
俺が全員ぶっちぎって
レオさんみたいに
最強だ。
私は
強くあらねばなりません。
笑顔にしたい。私の走りでみんな綾部さんと私の目標です。ライバルなんです。誰にも負けない。あなたに勝つ。
一番人気東海帝王。
Early last year, I stumbled across this clip from Umamusume Beginning of a New Era. At the time, I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know that it was of TM Opera O winning the Armakinen. I didn't even know that an Umamusume movie had been released at all. I certainly didn't expect this to be the start of a new obsession. What I did know, though, was that I had to see it. Fast forward 4 seasons, 1 4-episode net series, a movie, and tens of hours of gameplay, and suddenly I can't stop compulsively talking about anthropomorphized Japanese racehorses, of all things. I'm not a stranger to gacha game anime adaptations. I've seen Rage of Bahamut and Princess Connect Redive. Just recently, I stumbled across this Riku Hachima audio figure and was like, hey, that's a cool character design. I'm going to check out the Blue Archive anime. I wish I could get those 3 episodes of my time back. At best, these shows have been entertaining but kind of forgettable, so I can't say I had super high hopes for Umamusume, but I figured I'd at least get some eye candy. What I didn't expect was for it to be actually fucking amazing. Umamusume is set in an alternate, better universe, where in place of horse racing, there's horse-girl racing. Within that world, we're introduced to a variety of Umamusume, each given a personality created through an amalgamation of the traits, nicknames, accomplishments, and narratives surrounding real-life Japanese racehorses. Like in most gacha series, the characters are the biggest draw here. They're the core of the appeal, and in this department, Umamusume doesn't disappoint. Cygames works off the legends of horses like Goldship, known for his uncontrollable behavior, incredible late race passing ability, and that one time he decided he didn't want to win, losing 12 billion yen in betting money. Or Urara Haru, famous for entering 113 races in her career and not taking home a single victory. Is that an example of an indomitable spirit that never gives up, or animal abuse? You decide. Seriously though, Haru Urara's story is kinda sad. There's a lot of aspects of Umamusume that make me question the ethics of horse racing, this being probably the single most easily noticeable. Anyway, my bad. I'll stop ruining the vibes. Either way, it's a perfect example of the potential of racehorses for channeling the appeal of real-life sporting events into a gacha game context. You have historical races and aspirational storylines at your fingertips, with athletes that are mostly blank slates. The Umamusume anime take full advantage of this framework. Each takes the career of one racehorse and dramatizes it, condensing their race record and the narrative surrounding it into a single story. Each of these stories explores aspects of the nature of competition filtered through the challenges the protagonists face. While Umamusume is technically a sports anime, it feels very different from most others in the genre. There's not much of a focus on learning new techniques or drawn-out, long-form storytelling. For the most part, the horses barely even show any animosity or ill will towards each other. Instead, the series is bursting from the seams with endless, idealistic optimism. In Umamusume, dreams come true. Regardless of the lows and Uma experiences, regardless of any losses they take, regardless even if they have an incurable medical condition. By the logic of the Umamusume universe, all you need is a little inspiration and some hard work, and you can make the impossible possible. Whether that inspiration comes from love for a legendary Uma or respect for a rival, there is always a sense of admiration for fellow competitors driving overall improvement. And that's where I feel like Umamusume's idol influences are most apparent. Oh, did I not mention the horses are idols? They're idols. Because of course they are. While I may not be a huge fan of the parasocial extremes and other issues surrounding the commodification of idols, I can also recognize the value of fandom. Appreciating the talent and hard work of others and motivating yourself through your admiration of their accomplishments can be a real positive in someone's life. When things get you down, your Oshi just may be the light that carries you through the darkness. It's this element of inspiration that underlies the entirety of the series. Almost every protagonist throughout it has a hyperfixation on a past successful Uma. This provides an effective framing for the honestly pretty simple stories that Umamusume tells. You have a new talented racer as a protagonist that aims to reach the highs of their idols. And throughout their career ups and downs, they struggle with their own insecurities and failures on their path to that goal. It's a basic but pretty effective framework for telling stories that resonate with a lot of people. For the most part, the series glosses over the technicalities of racing, instead using each competition as a reflection of characters' development, interpersonal relationships, and emotional struggles. And don't make the mistake of thinking that makes Umamusume serious. It's absolutely not. This is a ridiculous series. In between introspective conversations and angst surrounding unfulfilled goals is an absurd sense of humor. From the very first episode, you're inundated with a series of gags, culminating with this comedic match cut.
来週デビュー戦だ。
ぶっ潰す。
Some recurring jokes become their own storyline, like this woman and her hairstylist who keeps getting distracted by the races on TV. And honestly, I have no idea why, but this guy jumping over the barrier in Celebration gets me every time. Someone won big, I guess. Even what minor world building there is full of a sense of whimsy. Like, okay, so outside of the single cut in the game's 2016 animated promotion trailer where Dai with Scarlet is drawn with human ears, in the actual show, every girl has a hairstyle or headwear that covers where their human ears should be, presumably because they don't have any. Which would explain why they use these hilariously long old-school landline phones and special custom headphones. There is an Umamusume lane on streets, like a bike lane, so they can run freely without endangering pedestrians, I guess. The girls will trot around the field and be pushed into the starting gate when they're hesitant, as if they were real horses. I don't even know where to start with the open questions around Umamusume genetics. Horse girls are shown to have human fathers, but always Uma mothers, so presumably it's a maternally inherited trait that only manifests in female children. I'm not a biologist, but if it's linked to the X chromosome, then males should be able to pass on the trait. So maybe it doesn't require an Umamusume mother, unless it's recessive and requires the Uma gene from both parents? I might be overthinking this. The key takeaway here is, if you want to enjoy Umamusume, you just kinda gotta roll with the punches. I mean, time doesn't even function in the Umamusume verse. Tokai Teo meets Symboli Rudolph as a small child, and however many years after, when she's old enough to enter Tracen Academy, Symboli Rudolph is still attending the school. Assuming all of the anime series take place within a single continuity, then Rudolph has to have been in Tracen Academy for at least a decade. In fact, most Umas introduced in this series have to have had been in school for a number of years. They never graduate, they never age. Or at least, not after they enter Tracen Academy. Convenient, huh? If the concept of horse girls on the face of it wasn't weird enough, apparently being one comes with the additional benefit of immortality. If you're willing to buy into the absurdity though, there's a unique experience to be had here. In a way, its mix of idols, humor, and surprisingly engaging storytelling kinda reminds me of Symphogear, at least a bit. If you haven't seen Symphogear, watch it, or better yet, watch my video about it. Unfortunately, also like Symphogear, Umamusume begins with its weakest showing. Umamusume Pretty Derby Season 1, despite creating the framework the series would use going forward, doesn't reach the highs it will eventually achieve. Focusing on Special Week, nicknamed Spei by her friends, the season goes through her racing career starting from the very beginning. Through her experience, we're introduced to the ins and outs of racing for the first time. And while it's not a boring introduction thanks to a sense of humor and quick pace, it's also kind of shallow. The season tries to simultaneously introduce a large cast of Umas and tell the story of Spei's career, and it fails at making either particularly interesting. Most of the cast has little to no characterization, they're borderline props. I didn't realize that Daiwa Scarlet was a tsundere until I played the game. Even the basic archetypes of many characters aren't conveyed here. I don't know if they just hadn't finished working out the details since the game was still in development or what, but it's not great. A perfect example of how these issues play out is in one of the most important story beats of the season, when Special Week's friend and idol, Silent Suzuka, breaks her leg during the Autumn Tennosho. Don't look up how that worked out in real life. In Umamusume, she gets better. But while Suzuka is recovering, Special Week loses focus, getting preoccupied with taking care of her. Her classmate, Grass Wonder, is frustrated with her distractedness. Having recently recovered from an injury herself, she feels like Spei isn't taking her seriously as a rival. This turns out to be the perfect motivation for Grass to make a surprise victory over Spei in the Takurazuka Kinen. In the wake of this loss, Special Week realizes that she needs to stop doting on Suzuka and refocus on her dream of becoming the top Umamusume in Japan. While all that makes sense on paper, in practice, it's pretty lackluster. I get that Special Week is worried about Suzuka out of fear that she may never be able to race again, but her love of Suzuka isn't explored much in the first place. Outside of the fact that Spei admires her talent, their relationship doesn't get enough development for Spei's obsessive worrying to feel reasonable. And as a result, it's hard for me to understand what I'm supposed to make of her being redirected back to her original goal. Is this a critique of how fixating too much on idols can actually distract from achieving personal success? Is it saying you have to find a healthy balance between caring for yourself and your friends? Is it simply about how Special Week has focus problems? Whatever it is, it's not conveyed effectively through the story. Grass Wonder also has such little screen time or characterization up to this point that her frustration with Spei feels entirely out of left field. We barely know anything about her, making her victory lack impact, and so the whole arc feels empty. While on paper, Special Week should be going through a major character development, she mostly feels static. More than anything, it comes off like Special Week got distracted because the story needed her to be. It's a good justification for her loss to Grass Wonder. And this is kind of the issue with a lot of the season. Things happen because they need to, as opposed to because there's an interesting story to be told. I don't want to come off too harsh, it's a fun, lighthearted watch, but it doesn't come together into anything really memorable. Still, at the core, there's something here. A unique idea that shines through the tepid execution. And in Season 2, that potential would be fully realized. Some people listen to motivational speakers for inspiration. Others may put on a sports documentary. But people who are serious, rewatch Umamusume Season 2. There is a reason it broke records for Blu-ray sales in Japan. Okay, that reason was the included gacha codes, but still. With the protagonist this time around, Tokai Teo, already introduced in Season 1, Season 2 is able to jump right into the action, skipping the early parts of her career. The series really hits the ground running, giving the perfect chance to take in the changes to the visual direction. With the switch from PA Works to Studio Kai handling production, there's an upgrade in both the animation quality and the cinematography. Rather than a total evolution, it's more like a refinement of the visuals from Season 1. The lines are a little sharper and cleaner, the contrast and saturation are slightly increased, and the camera work is a bit more dynamic. There are more sweeping shots to add some flair to different moments. Season 1 could feel kind of stilted during races, with many similar steady shots of racers in run loops, and it's impressive how much a few flourishes and a minor increase in animation quality can bring to the presentation. The cost of this improvement is the use of a lot of very noticeable CGI. Some may prefer the look of Season 1 because of it, but I personally think that the dynamism these changes bring is worth the trade-off. This new presentation is shown off from the very beginning, through Teo's victory in the Japanese Derby. This season reintroduces Teo in peak form, showing the charisma and athleticism that's made her the breakout star of her generation. Her win in the Japanese Derby puts her one step away from following in the footsteps of her hero, Symboli Rudolph, by becoming an undefeated Triple Crown Umamusume. Unfortunately, that dream is shattered immediately following the race by an injury preventing her from running in the Kikasho. Throughout the remainder of the season, Teo suffers setback after setback, and in the face of failing to accomplish her longtime dream, struggles to find motivation to continue racing. Teo's conflict isn't particularly unusual or complex. It's not even that tragic for the most part. There are worse things that can happen than an athlete not achieving their dreams. What it is relatable. Everyone has failed to meet a goal they set for themselves, and that hurts, whether the failure was in your control or not. The question is really, where do you go from there? Like many people, that's where Teo finds herself lost. So how does she find her way? The power of friendship. Or, well, maybe more like rivalry? Kind of both, I guess. It's through the relationships with other Umas that Teo finds new drive. This time around, the extended cast is actually well fleshed out, with their stories intertwining with Teo's. Mejiro McQueen is undoubtedly the most important supporting character, being Teo's friend and rival. She's the first to break Teo's undefeated record, but is also the reason that Teo finds new purpose in racing. McQueen wants to race the best possible competition, and in her mind, that's Teo. And that sentiment reinvigorates her, giving her the resolve to return to the track and live up to that image. The idea of rivalry as a motivator does appear in Season 1, I mean, it's in the Grass Wonder storyline, but it isn't engaged with there as heavily as it is this time around. Season 2 presents the idea that certain motivators, like the idolatry Teo feels for Symboli Rudolph, can only go so far, and when they fail, there's inspiration to be found all around you, through mutual respect with one's peers. While at the end of the day, each Uma is seeking their own individual glory, victory only becomes meaningful in the context of the effort and hard work their competitors put in. And so, when a rival acknowledges your skill and actively wants to compete with you at your best, that can be a powerful motivator. This friendly but intense spirit of competition comes into play in various storylines in Season 2. Rice Shower, for example, gets an arc where after winning the Kika show and preventing Mihono Bourbon from completing her attempt at a triple crown, the resulting fan disappointment causes her to want to quit running. Instead of bringing people happiness with her win, she feels like she's ruined the excitement around Bourbon, unexpectedly becoming the villain in the narrative. McQueen is disappointed by the loss of new promising competition, and so Teo, injured and unable to train at the time, decides to help resolve the situation. Together with Mihono Bourbon, the two confront Rice Shower, and in a development that mirrors the relationship of Teo and McQueen, it's Bourbon's admiration of Rice Shower's hard work and achievement that gives her the motivation to try again. So, she trains in the woods, comes back locked in, and wins the Tenosho over Mejiro McQueen. And in the process, gains the courage to keep racing until one day she's recognized for her achievements. Don't look up the real Rice Shower's career. In Umamusume, she has a bright future ahead of her. Even a joke character like Twin Turbo plays into the same idea. Throughout the season, she's constantly yapping about her one-sided rivalry with Teo, despite her unimpressive race results. This is turned on its head though, when Teo suffers one too many injuries and is on the verge of retiring, out of the understanding that she likely will never be able to run at her full potential again. Turbo may not realistically be a rival for Teo in a direct sense. I mean, they never actually race, Teo doesn't even remember her name. But to Turbo, Teo's retirement is basically a betrayal of that aforementioned spirit of competition, which simultaneously feels like it invalidates her efforts as Teo's self-proclaimed rival. While that may seem like a self-centered rejection of reality, like I said, in Umamusume, dreams come true. And by those rules, giving up is the worst thing you can do. So, determined to show Teo the power of perseverance, Turbo pulls off a miraculous win against top competition. And while this may be a cheesy, idealistic, melodramatic moment, it's also incredible. And it actually happened. I mean, not the Twin Turbo inspiring Tokai Teo part, but you know what I mean. This scene is one of the many throughout the season that are just so sincere. There's no pretentiousness, no irony poisoning or self-awareness to undermine the appeal to your emotions. Unlike the first season, this time around there are real peaks and valleys in the emotional arcs of the story, and when Teo makes it out on the other side, it feels truly triumphant. And for the most part, Season 3 keeps up the quality. Once again handled by Studio Kai, it retains most of the improvements made in Season 2. even if it doesn't quite reach the same heights. It's still a solid watch, but it's definitely a bit disjointed. This time around, we follow new protagonist Kita-san Black, introduced to us through the Satsuki show. Hoping to win the race and following the footsteps of her idol, Tokai Teo, she's outshined by her competitor, Duramente, who puts on a show-stopping performance, overtaking most of the pack from behind. While disappointed, Kita resolves to try her best in the upcoming Japanese Derby. Unfortunately, she can't hold on to her position and falls to the back of the pack, while Duramente again steals the show, becoming the rising star of their generation. These failures informed Kita's journey throughout a lot of the season. Like Teo's failure to match up to Simboli Rudolph's legacy, Kita's failure to live up to Teo's is a big disappointment. But while Teo's story focuses more around a lack of passion following unmet expectations and a sense of futility in the face of repeated injuries, Kita's is more about internalizing negative feelings based on her performances. Kita is a negative self-talker. She focuses on the ways she finds herself to be deficient in skill or talent or charisma. She is upset about failing to win the Tokyo Derby, but it's more important to her that she feels unable to live up to Teo's star power. She just doesn't seem to capture the heart of the fans in the same way. Kita's reaction to this failure is what establishes her ongoing fight with her internal perception of herself. The thing is, Duramente gets injured right after the Japanese Derby in episode 1. And in response, Kita's first thoughts are that maybe now she'll be able to win. She's relieved her biggest obstacles out of her way rather than striving to overcome that obstacle through her own effort. That immediate reaction spirals into a feeling of self-loathing. On one level because she feels guilty about hoping to capitalize on Duramente's misfortune, and in a more abstract sense because she's breaking the spirit of friendly competitiveness running through the series. Like in Teo's case, it's again the extended cast that helps her overcome this, particularly Nice Nature. Part of Teo's generation of Umas and known as a bronze collector due to her habit of placing third, Nature was talented but outshined by her peers. With that experience, she's able to relate to Kita and gives her advice throughout the season, even if it's increasingly uncomfortable for her when Kita later starts to rack up wins. In this and other cases, Season 3 lives up to Season 2's exploration and characterization of the extended cast. Seeing Kita's best friend and rival, Satono Diamond, work to get her family's first G1 win, seeing Goldship run her final race before retiring, and seeing Cheval Grand struggle with her own inferiority complex surrounding her sisters are all interesting. And each ties into Kita's story in its own way, with characters either serving as rivals, friends, or both. Where the season has problems is in how it struggles to tie all these stories together smoothly. While Kita gets a G1 win in Duramente's absence, her inferiority complex doesn't just disappear. When she eventually confronts Duramente, this complex morphs into a rivalry, but that rivalry never really gets satisfyingly resolved. If it wasn't clear already, injuries play a large part in Umamusume, and Season 2 established a pattern of dancing around career-ending ones. Anytime Uma's real-life counterpart would have retired, the story just leaves them in indefinite recovery. You won't see them race again, but they're fine. They just need some inspiration to help them get over their incurable condition. And so, when during her return in the Takarazuka Kinen, Duramente gets an injury that would end the real horse's career, it leaves her newly formed rivalry with Kita feeling abruptly cut short. Not only did she and Kita both lose, coming in second and third respectively, Duramente is left in recovery for the remainder of the season. She's borderline written out of the story. While she appears periodically and pays lip service to being Kita's rival, Duramente spends the rest of the season as a non-factor. Instead, Satono Diamond would emerge to take her place. Having outshined Kita since they were young, Daya still engages with Season 3's exploration of Kita's inferiority complex. But this transition still feels like an awkward consequence of sticking to real events. There is another, similarly abrupt transition in narrative focus later on, when Kita suddenly sees declining performance. After realizing that she's past her athletic peak, she announces her plans to retire. While this is kind of foreshadowed earlier on through Gold Ship's retirement after struggling to stay competitive, there's still not much reason to expect this development for Kita, especially since it's not really connected to the ideas explored earlier in the season. This is a real thing that happened to the actual horse, but it doesn't make for a natural feeling narrative. While it may not be as seamless as Season 2, Season 3 isn't bad by any means. In fact, it makes another visual leap compared to its predecessor. Like Season 2, Season 3 again refines the series' aesthetic, but this time the improvement in the depiction of races is more significant. Season 3 reduces the use of speed lines, white voids, and profile shots, instead adding more drone-ish sweeping shots, alongside increased low and high angle wide shots. There's a focus on getting more Umas in every frame as well, which prevents how isolated the races could feel before. Even the CG models are used in smarter ways. By using shot composition and blur, the camera tries to draw your attention away from CG characters, and when they do come into focus, they usually transition into hand-drawn animation, which looks on model and well positioned in space no matter how much the camera is flying around the field. These kind of tricks also appear in Season 2, but they're used more times in better ways in Season 3. It helps that the models themselves have gotten a serious facelift. The ground is still a textured flat plane, but you know, can't win them all. Despite my criticism, Season 3 is still an enjoyable watch, with themes and ideas that do come through even if they don't fully stick the landing. There are plenty of great moments, we're introduced to a fun cast of new Umas, and most importantly, we get a bunch of scenes with nice nature. Objectively, the best character. But when its predecessor hit what it's going for so effectively, Season 3 was almost inevitably going to be at least a little disappointing. That said, between these 3 seasons, even with some fluctuation in quality, there's a lot to enjoy. The anime gives a window into the world, the characters, and the ethos of Umamusume. It's not the only series to embody the idea that with hard work, anything is possible, but it is incredibly effective at making you believe it. We've seen Umas make impossible victories, recover from career-ending injuries, and fulfill their dreams. Or at least we've seen some of them do that. The anime is really just an advertisement for the game, and man, it is a potent gateway drug. While I loved watching Teo and Kita and Spei make history, what I wanted was to see Nice Nature have that same moment of triumph. I wanted to see her fulfill her dreams, and of course, that's where the game fills in the gaps. Personally, I'm a pretty big gacha game hater. I don't like limited events, I don't like having a million different collectibles and currencies, I don't like monetization based on gambling on PNGs, and I especially don't like that those PNGs are gone forever when they decide to take down the servers. But even I gotta admit, this game is fun as hell. The Raising Sim roguelite gameplay is shockingly satisfying, and learning how to properly train your Uma is incredibly rewarding. I'm not ashamed to admit I've cheered out loud when seeing my trainees win. But while the gameplay of Umamusume is very fun, unfortunately, everything surrounding it kinda pisses me off. I can feel this game manipulating me, and I don't like it. Like, okay, so one of the core appeals of gacha games is the character designs, right? So when I start a campaign with Nature and she's dressed like this, I'm rightfully confused. Where is her racing outfit? Well, the character-specific outfit, one of the main things a fan of the series would want to see, requires the character to have 3 stars, but Nice Nature is a common 1-star pull in the gacha. To rank her up, you need star pieces, which you can get multiple ways. The primary way though is, what else but rolling gacha, which of course requires a different currency that can either be accumulated over time or for the impatient, purchased. Every system in this game feels like part of an unnecessarily complex funnel designed to push you into gambling for horse girls, and hopefully to pay for it. I would much prefer that this were just a game you could outright buy. At the same time, the game's story elements are interesting enough, but not incredible or anything. As far as I've seen, they're a much more limited version of the same type of storytelling seen in the anime. relying on basic, relatable, and easily identifiable character traits to make any given Uma's straightforward story arc engaging. But when combined with the events of the anime and the lore surrounding the original horse, an interesting meta-narrative emerges surrounding certain Umas. Trying to win the Arima Kinen with Haru Urara isn't just satisfying because it's difficult, it's because we've seen how she's outclassed by her peers in season 1, and know the real-life horse's losing streak. This win is the realization of a dream ascribed to this interpretation of the character. Similarly, we see Nice Nature struggle to get wins throughout season 2, and we hear her describe to Kita-san Black how she felt outclassed by Teo within her generation of Umas. So when you take on the Triple Crown and decisively win against Teo, it holds more weight. The power of these characters and stories combined has pushed Umamusume into the pantheon of franchises I can't help but obsess over, alongside the likes of Symphogear and Guilty Gear. While I have my issues with the game, through its synergy with the anime, it feels like it completes the franchise. But that's the thing. If the series stopped here, it would already be great. But it doesn't. And instead of sticking with a working formula, Cygames decides to take the series in a new direction. A decision that makes the franchise even more interesting than it already was. Umamusume Road to the Top technically aired before season 3, but isn't really a sequel to season 2. It clearly defines itself as separate from its mainline counterparts. In a lot of ways, it's built on the same foundation. It still focuses on turning the careers of real-life racehorses into narratives, it still relies on the same setting and world building. But the vibes are definitely different. With Cygames themselves handling production, the series brings a new aesthetic and tone, separating itself from PA Works and Studio Kai's efforts. Road to the Top makes heavy use of colored line work and frequently a notably desaturated color scheme. I'm no expert here, but from what I can tell, this is to create a simulation of more varied types of lighting. Low contrast scenes are essentially in situations with diffused, soft, ambient light, and high levels of contrast are used to make hard lighting really pop. This looks great. Much better than season 2 and 3, which simulate lighting using these gradient overlays that I've always hated. Road to the Top gives you a strong sense of the light's directionality and uses that to great effect, making for some gorgeous moments. The upgrade in visuals doesn't stop at the style though. The actual animation is a step up as well. By season 3, the animation of the mainline series had become quite solid with a consistent level of quality, but is never pushed beyond that. Road to the Top is the first time I personally found that there were cuts that actually drew me in on the merit of their expressiveness. While the immersion-breaking CGI isn't gone, they hide it about as well as season 3. Outside of a few unfortunate shots, it's mostly obscured. The new identity goes beyond the visuals though. While the game and mainline seasons of anime share parts of their score, Road to the Top breaks that trend, sharing no music with any existing part of the franchise. I mean, the insert songs may be in the Japanese version of the game, but the score otherwise, as far as I've seen, only shows up here. All these changes are in service of a new approach to Umamusume's storytelling. Road to the Top focuses on the stories of the protagonist Narita Top Road, and her rivals Admire Vega and TM Opera O. Unlike the mainline protagonists, Top Road would never become the standout Uma of her generation. Despite having put in the hard work to be a top talent, she would only ever take home one G1 victory. Throughout the web series, we watch Top Road struggle with her failures during her journey to that single G1 win. It's Top Road's road to the top. It's in the name. But honestly, despite the new setup, the many visual improvements, and the interesting new scenario, I don't particularly like Road to the Top. In fact, most of the interesting changes that it makes come with downsides that kind of ruin their potential. The visuals may have gotten an impressive upgrade stylistically, but I find many of the races kind of boring. Just comparing Road to the Top and Season 3, the web series seems to have a more restrained approach to camera movement. There are less flashy moving shots, and some of the ones that are there feel weird and out of place. While in terms of the animation quality, there's no comparison, the more mundane composition sometimes gives me the same feeling as watching Season 1. Honestly, I prefer Season 3's races over Road to the Top's. It's not just the races though. The mainline seasons also have a more fun, upbeat tone. Road to the Top is almost entirely missing the winking, self-aware humor that runs throughout seasons 1 through 3. And while taking a more serious approach is fine, in this case, it could have used some humor to smooth over what I find to be a pretty unengaging story. Narita Top Road is a character that I want to like. I like her design, her hard-working attitude, and her relatability. She's got the anime protagonist energy. She may not be the most talented, but she'll put in the hard work to reach her goals. I just feel like she doesn't have a very strong arc. Throughout the series, she struggles with failing to meet the expectations of her trainer and fans, suffering one loss after another. Eventually, with the help of her trainer, she realizes that her value in the eyes of those around her isn't in whether or not she wins, instead is in admiration of her dedication to constant improvement. This realization allows her to lighten the pressure she feels from others' expectations and find new meaning in racing through her rivalry with Admire Vega. And that new mentality leads her to finally cinch out a G1 win. Definitely some familiar ideas there. My real issue is just that her story is a bit boring. For all the aspects of Top Road I like, she's almost too straightforward of a character. In contrast, her rival, Admire Vega, nicknamed Ayabe, has kind of the opposite problem. Ayabe's arc is vastly different from any ideas Umamusume has previously explored. Throughout the story, she struggles with depression, feeling guilt over the fact that her twin sister was sacrificed before they were born. While they're kind of vague about why in the anime, in real life, apparently this is done because twins don't perform well in races. This is, understandably, pretty traumatic knowledge for someone to receive, and we see how it weighs on Ayabe. Throughout the series, she goes on these spirit journeys, I guess, communicating with her sister somehow. I would say it's metaphorical or a hallucination or something, but they imply a supernatural connection since racing would cause Ayabe to feel a profound sadness, even before she knew she had a twin. Either way, her story is essentially her struggling with the intense survivor's guilt she feels, something only made worse when she finds joy in racing. Still, Ayabe self-destructively continues to race out of the desire to honor the memory of her sister, pushing through her feelings of self-loathing and ignoring a worsening leg injury along the way. There's a whole lot going on there, and I'm not sure Road to the Top has the runtime to do it all justice. While initially it seems like she's overcome her trauma after winning the Japanese Derby in episode 2, she falls back into despair afterwards. Eventually, the same sense of rivalry that reinvigorates Top Road also pierces Ayabe's gloomy exterior, and helps her rediscover her love of racing. But I don't know, I just don't buy it. While Top Road and Ayabe interact a few times throughout the story, their relationship is tenuous at best. They never build enough of a connection that I can buy that suddenly, Top Road is able to shake her out of her cycle of depression. I do like that they tried something new with Ayabe, tackling subject matter that is pretty dark by Umamusume standards. At its best, her story definitely has the most standout moments here. It's just a bit overstuffed and doesn't have enough room to really flourish within the 4-episode runtime Road to the Top is working with. Honestly, while she's kind of obnoxious, mostly by design, TM Opera O definitely has the standout personality of the three. Her lack of an interesting arc is similar to Top Road though. Opera O's only motivation is her personal belief that she's destined for greatness, and her struggle to prove that to the world. This storyline is only impactful if the viewer already knows that TM Opera O would become one of the most successful Japanese racehorses of all time. With that knowledge, we understand that Opera O's vision of her future success will actually come true, and so she has a right to be frustrated in the process of fulfilling it. But solely within the context of this story, she's obnoxiously boastful, without supplying much reason for the viewer to identify with and understand the source of this self-confidence. While Ayabe's story feels overstuffed, Opera O's feels like it's missing parts, almost like it's tacked on. This story is well paid off in Road to the Top's follow-up, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In the grand scheme of the Umamusume franchise, Road to the Top is a line of demarcation. It represents a vibe shift, a change in the approach of how to depict the universe, and a statement that Cygames is willing to experiment within reason. And because of that, while it's not my favorite entry in the franchise, or my second, or my fourth, it is an important step forward. A step that would lead to arguably the pinnacle of the series. Finally, it all comes full circle. Back to the clip that got me here in the very beginning. Road to the Top was followed up by the movie, Umamusume: Beginning of a New Era, and despite all my anticipation, it did not disappoint. For almost every way that Road to the Top takes a swing at something new and misses, Beginning of a New Era builds on that foundation to stunning results. Visually, this film is amazing. It maintains Road's use of color palettes and digital effects to create impressive lighting, but pushes further in making certain moments visually striking. At times, the colors border on becoming garish, but never push too far, creating a uniquely vibrant look. Races are filled with the most interesting camera work the series has seen, ranging from point of view shots to impossibly manic jumps between racers. Add on top of that the various abstract visuals and incredible moments of Sakuga, and every race becomes a standout. New Era also has my favorite soundtrack in the series. It's eclectic, going from strange electronic cacophonies to swelling acoustic guitar-led symphonic tracks to rhythmic drums that remind me of Monika's Yuki Yuna or Nier scores. Shit, at times, the music sounds more like it belongs in a survival horror game than a series about idle horse girls. The soundtrack manages a wide range of moods and sounds that all add to the impact of every scene, races or otherwise. Even in scenes without background music, the silence is deafening, the lack of sound feeling thick and atmospheric, making a statement in of itself. With visuals and music combined, moments like Kiseki Fuji's run in the Yayoi show are able to very effectively convey the feelings felt by the in-universe spectators. And it's important for this scene in particular to hit as well as it does because of how important it is to the protagonist this time around, Jungle Pocket. Jungle Pocket, nicknamed Poke, definitely fits the Umamusume protagonist mold. Inspired by the running of Fuji Kiseki, she decides that she's going to become the fastest Umamusume in the world. And so she quits street racing, enrolls in Tracing Academy, and starts her official career. Unfortunately, her promising future seems in flux when she runs into Agnes Tachyon, a calculated, scientific rival whose natural talent and endless experimentation leads her to decisive victories over Poke. And herein lies the core conflict of the movie. Tachyon stands as an insurmountable wall that Poke can't cross, a dilemma that only causes her more distress when Tachyon decides to stop racing indefinitely. Poke's story ties into many of the ideas we've seen before. She's talented, but struggles to cinch out the wins that she's worked so hard for, like Top Road or Kita. And once Tachyon leaves racing, it seems like Poke will never have the chance to prove herself a worthy competitor to her rival, leaving her with an inferiority complex that she can't shake, even after winning the Japanese Derby. Eventually, after having a heart-to-heart with her friend and idol, Fuji Kiseki, Poke resolves to prove herself above all others, and decides to validate her rivalry with Tachyon by entering the Japan Cup. And it's here that TM Opera O re-enters the picture. That initial clip that stoked my interest in the series comes from early in New Era, where Poke, Kiseki, and their trainer watch Opera O win the Arumakinen. Beginning of a New Era is essentially a direct sequel to Road to the Top, and it's through this clip that we get payoff for Opera O's story from the web series. At this point, her competitive dominance has marked her as the conqueror of the century's end. Undoubtedly the top talent of her generation, she's fulfilled her aspirations of greatness we saw in Road to the Top. The Arumakinen is our reintroduction to her through the eyes of new up-and-coming talent, positioning her as a seemingly unstoppable hurdle. This portrayal of Opera O, personally, feels like it better matches her personality and demeanor. Rather than coming off as obnoxious, her princely presence plays into her otherworldly talent, making her really feel like the final boss. This is a great payoff for her arc in Road to the Top that elevates that work. I've talked mostly about each of these series in terms of what I think of them individually. It's hard to say how much a work should be judged based on its external context, as opposed to what's directly expressed within it. How much additional information affects your enjoyment of a specific work is up to you to decide. But in the context of Umamusume, this is a perfect example of how the franchise as a collective strengthens each individual work. Despite Tachion's absence, there's weight to Poke's participation in the Japan Cup because of Opera O's presence. And that weight comes from both the setup within this film alone, as well as knowledge of other works. So when Poke actually manages to take the win over Opera O, while she never gets to defeat Tachion, it feels like a resolution to her journey. Nobody can deny her strength any longer. The story of Beginning of a New Era works not only because of how well the plot and characters are constructed, but also because of how effectively they're depicted. While the series has experimented a bit in how it portrays its characters, it's only in New Era that it fully breaks with its marriage to a cutesy, moe version of them. It brings a new interpretation to the series' character designs, using a more angular look, while also fully leaning into the depiction of their emotions. Determination, stress, disappointment, shock, pain, frustration, euphoria. All of these and more are lovingly rendered throughout the film. New Era pushes how far it can contort and exaggerate faces more than anything else in the franchise, which may be less glamorous, but in exchange gains a raw impact. The imagery throughout this film is powerful and elevates the struggle of the cast to prove themselves. It's a testament to the raw strength of visuals for delivering powerful moments in animation, and it really helps characterize Poke, expressing her frustration and failures while strengthening the catharsis of her eventual successes. Though Poke is the protagonist of New Era, Tachion is, in my book, the real breakout star of the movie. Tachion isn't just a rival to Poke, she serves as a foil in many ways. Poke's brash, rough and tumble personality causes her to wear her emotions on her sleeve, but Tachion, while eccentric and animated, hides her feelings behind a shield of scientific apathy. This mix of over-the-top antics and quiet contemplativeness is brought to life by Uesaka Sumire's incredible performance, which might be the single most impressive in the series. The dialogue in Beginning of a New Era has a more naturalistic approach than most anime. There's a different pacing and delivery is often a bit more muted than I'm used to. It occasionally leans closer to sounding like a real-life conversation, but it also dials up the theatricality when necessary. Tachion is the character that uses these extremes the most. Initially, we see this through the magnetic eccentricity she shows in her interactions with the Umas around her. From her unhinged behavior to her very old-timey, honorific way of speaking, she makes an immediate impression. Tachion is obsessed with discovering the limits of Umamusume capability. And in the first half of the film, this manifests in both many bizarre conversations with her classmates and her dominant racing performances. But it's made clear very quickly that Tachion's leg won't be able to withstand the wear of racing for very long. Being the closed-off, socially inept science nerd that she is, Tachion doesn't confide in anyone about this and simply announces her indefinite hiatus without warning or explanation. Throughout the rest of the movie, she tries to rationalize her decision by saying that her interest in the limits of Umamusume's speed is purely scientific, and that she doesn't care whether it's her or someone else that actually achieves it. But through the way she's framed in shots and her erratic behavior, it's clear that her injury and semi-retirement are causing her distress. And in the moments where she's left alone, she quickly becomes more muted in her demeanor. Once again, this injury was a career-ending one for the real Agnes Tachion, and so it's easy to presume that anime Tachion clings to her scientific pursuits out of fear that she won't be able to achieve the speed she dreams of, or may even lose the ability to run altogether. Despite her detached veneer, when Poke confronts her over abandoning their rivalry, Tachion lashes out, intentionally antagonizing her. And while the two barely interact throughout the rest of the film, unlike Duramente and Kita's rivalry in Season 3, Tachion and Poke's relationship remains an essential through line of the movie, affecting each in different ways. And eventually, Poke's victory in the Japan Cup serves as a resolution for both of them, shaking Tachion out of her haze and causing her to realize that her scientific pursuit means nothing if she can't reach the pinnacle of speed herself. Tachian never once throughout the film directly verbalizes her insecurities or emotional struggles. Her entire arc is basically implied through visuals and Uesaka's performance. As the film goes on, Tachian is increasingly framed in claustrophobic ways, with objects often boxing her in the frame, presenting her as isolated and closed off. This is complemented by how, throughout the movie, her room becomes increasingly disorganized, with more stacked boxes and scattered papers, showing her deteriorating mental state. It's not only Tachian who gets these kind of subtle storytelling beats though. I love this moment where trainer Tanabe talks to Poke about how he feels he failed Fuji Kiseki. Throughout the conversation, Fuji shows up and you can see her regret over her lost career, with the various cuts to her eavesdropping showing how painful those memories are. Despite all of this praise, Beginning of a New Era never quite hits my emotions directly in the way that Season 2 does. But it's not quite trying to do that. It doesn't lean into melodrama in that way, but the more subtle approach it takes to telling its story is, in my book, just as good. The whole thing feels artsy, for lack of a better word, and combined with how gorgeous its best moments can be, I feel like it should be easy to say it's the high point of the series, but I can't shake this nagging feeling when trying to make that assertion. While Beginning of a New Era is probably the best single work in the franchise, I still feel like Season 2 represents its core more effectively. The humor, the aesthetic, the more straightforward delivery of characters' emotions, the greater focus on exploring the extended cast, it all feels like a better expression of what the series was intended to be, at least if the game is anything to go by. But then again, who am I to say what the core of Umamusume is? In a way, part of the beauty of the franchise is its flexibility. Agnes Tachian can be an eccentric goofball mad scientist in one depiction, and a self-destructive antisocial shut-in in another. But somehow, they both feel like Agnes Tachian. This flexibility extends to the very makeup of Umamusume's different stories. They can shift from lighthearted melodrama to muted brooding and not feel like a betrayal of the series' foundation. Don't get me wrong, there are bounds to how far Umamusume seems willing to go in its artistic exploration. The reality here is that Umamusume is a corporately constructed product. It was launched out of the gate as a media mix franchise. It already had 4 different manga, 2 anime series, and a web series all before the gacha game even dropped. I'm hesitant to look at the creative decisions made within the franchise as anything less than a calculated move on Cygames' part. Umamusume's flexibility isn't a bug, it's a feature. They've made it into a beloved multi-billion-dollar franchise. I think they may have an okay idea of what they're doing, at least. Despite the shifts in vibe, look, and storytelling between the various anime, it has to be said that nothing here is particularly avant-garde or challenging to viewer expectations. It all stays within reason. These variations feel like they come less out of a pure desire to create something new and more from an attempt to appeal to a broad variety of tastes. That may be a cynical take, but if Cygames has proven anything, it's that it's really good at making great art out of commercial ventures. And with the most recent Umamusume anime, it's taken that art in a slightly more traditional direction. If I had to pick a single anime in the franchise that can penetrate the skeptical reaction you get when explaining that the Horse Girl anime is good, actually, it would be Cinderella Grey. Not because it's the best, but because it has the lowest barrier to entry. Cinderella Grey focuses on the legendary Oguri Cap, a racehorse that emerged from the regional circuit in Kasumatsu to become a national star, capturing the hearts of fans along the way. While it's the most recent series to air on TV, it's technically one of the oldest stories in the franchise, because it's the only anime based on a manga. Cinderella Grey was serialized in the weekly Young Jump Seinen magazine starting in 2020, having just recently wrapped up its run. And unlike previous series, which progress incredibly quickly, having months pass within a single episode, Cinderella Grey has 23 volumes worth of time to dedicate to Oguri Cap's career. For the first time in an Umamusume anime, the narrative is based around long-form storytelling. And so, for the first time, the anime really digs into the technical details of racing, with strategies and techniques explained directly. For For the first time, races last more than a single episode, with explanations of characters' skill sets or backstories interspersed in the middle of the action. And for the first time, we get some world building that actually explores the wider universe of Umamusume. All of this coalesces into an experience that's neither like the moe-driven cutesy melodrama of the main series, or the eerie moodiness of Beginning of a New Era. Despite its seinen magazine roots, the Cinderella Grey adaptation is just a shonen sports anime. A good one, but just a shonen sports anime. And that impression starts with Oguri herself. Oguri Cap falls into the classic shonen protagonist mold. She is straightforward, somewhat naive, lacking in social skills, and she is absolutely single-mindedly obsessed with running. Like, wakes up at 4 a.m. every day to train level obsessed. She has that Ashton Hall grind set schedule. Why does she do it?
走れるから。
She's just in it for the love of the game. With her unusually flexible legs and non-stop practice, Oguri turns out to be an unexpected talent, and after being discovered by a trainer in her small hometown of Kasumatsu, this talent quickly carries her to the national stage, where she attempts to prove herself as the best of the best. Oguri Cap's racing career lasted from 1987 to 1990 in real life, earlier than the majority of official, properly named Umamusume in the series, and so most of them can't show up here. In order to actually be able to tell a 20+ volume story, this space is filled up with legally distinct interpretations of actual racehorses, that neither share names with their inspirations nor show up in the gacha game proper. Characters like Dicta Striker, based on the real-life horse Soccer Boy, make up a large part of the cast. And while they may be second-class characters to the franchise at large, within the context of Cinderella Grey, they get equal billing with Sakura Chiyono-o, Yae no Muteki, or any other official Uma. They feel seamless in the series, with fantastic character designs that slot right in beside the slightly adjusted look of most of the official characters. The most important of these original characters, both in terms of screen time and world building, is Bell No Light. While every Umamusume series starts with Umamusume, 彼女たちは走るために生まれてきた. Cinderella Grey will make you start to wonder,
Are you sure about that?
For the first time, we get to see a slightly broader view of this world outside of just racing. This is most evident in the role of Bell No Light. Bell No is not a talented racer, but having a family that runs a sports equipment chain, she is extremely knowledgeable about gear and the technical details of racing. This leads her to enroll in the sports science department of Tracen Academy's main campus, something that up until now had never been mentioned. Effectively, she serves as Oguri's assistant trainer throughout the series, offering strategies and advice that help her along. The same idea applies to other characters to a lesser degree. Take Norn Ace, whose family owns a dance studio and who trains Oguri to dance. Even if it's not the most detailed stuff in the world, the implication of actual lives for Umamusume outside of the racetrack does a lot to breathe more life into the world at large. This applies to human characters as well, who normally take a back seat to Umamusume, as opposed to the mainline series' trainers, who are pretty thinly characterized at best. This time we get trainers with distinct personalities, backstories, and developed relationships with their trainees. We even meet other side characters, like reporters and URA board members. It really just helps the world feel less limited, breathing some additional life into it. Of course, the core of the series is still the racing, and don't worry, Cinderella Grey has plenty of racing. The long timeline means there's no glossing over any part of Oguri's career, and so we get to see her races from the very beginning. And as has been the case for multiple series at this point, they look great. While it may not reach the heights of Beginning of a New Era visually, Cinderella Grey is easily the best looking TV anime in the franchise. It continues with many of the stylistic choices in the other Cygames Pictures productions, mainly the desaturated look and use of digital effects. Unlike those other anime though, it never gets very vibrant, instead opting for a more, gray look. That said, the art direction is consistent and clean, and the animation overall maintains a high quality. Characters are always on model, you have to be specifically looking to notice any CGI, and camera angles are interesting and dynamic. That's all boosted by a quality soundtrack full of hype horns and dramatic strings. In terms of the actual content of the races though, I would describe Cinderella Grey as more mechanical than past series. Not in the sense of machinery, but in the sense of game mechanics. It feels like there's more rules and logic surrounding racing than in past series. Something like Beginning of a New Era is less concerned about how and Uma wins, as opposed to why. A single race doesn't give a lot of information about the decisions competitors make within it. They're fast-paced roller coasters that reflect the determination and emotional state of runners at that particular point in the story. Cinderella Grey instead is more interested in the technical aspects of racing. It cares more how an Uma wins. Moment-to-moment decision-making gets more of a focus here. Strategy comes into play much more than previous series. And because of the inclusion of anime-exclusive extended cast members, there's a larger number of plot-relevant Umas in any given race, which allows for more interactions between characters you have some investment in throughout. The series has that common effect of manga adaptations where an amount of text that makes sense in the context of static panels starts to feel overstuffed in the context of a real-time show. Races that were at most minutes long in real life become stretched out through exposition and flashbacks, giving you more context on the various characters involved. That feeling is a genre convention though, and for those who love shonen anime adaptations, is just how these series tend to be. Probably the best representation of this shonenification of Umamusume's racing comes at the end of Cinderella Grey's first core, where we're introduced to the concept of the zone. At the end of the day, Umamusume is just about running. There's not really any special techniques per se. But through the concept of the zone, Cinderella Grey is still able to capture their appeal. I don't quite want to say Umamusume ripped the idea off from Kuroko's basketball, considering the concept of being in the zone is a thing in real life, but the way it exists here is very reminiscent of that show. They speak about it like it's a Super Saiyan transformation or something, as opposed to basically just being super focused. But that depiction plays into the shonen anime vibe. It's not something as mundane as simply being locked in. It's more of a technique or skill. It's an install super.
頭も体も硬くなっちまってた。
As opposed to the other series, where we get imagery expressing a character's determination and effort at that specific moment, Cinderella Grey establishes the zone as an in-universe concept that it calls on repeatedly to explain how any specific Uma is able to outmatch their competition. Umamusume has played with the idea of depicting racers with auras and such, but with the zone, now there's an established rule set as to when Tamamo Cross will explode with lightning, or Oguri Cap will be shrouded in edgy clouds of darkness. Something I can't deny is kinda sick. Cinderella Grey clearly has a fixation on cool shit. There are plenty of ridiculous, over-the-top visuals that make foot races seem like world-shattering, epic battles. Remember that all this
よ
ドルンは
あかんプレッシャー半端ないなのにどうしてあの二人に届く気が
is based on this.
クロスです。逃げるレジェンド帝王がその差が2馬身と詰め寄られましたが
Like New Era, it pushes away from the more moe depiction of Umas, but this time moves into a borderline edgy interpretation, which gives a real impression of actual antagonism between racers. The energy here is less, let's all get along and do our best, and more, I will crush you underfoot on my road to victory. Characters are frequently made to look super hardcore, even if that feels a bit weird. Oguri saying I refuse to lose to you, for example, is a little too aggressive coming from her, in my opinion. It is fun though, if a bit try-hard and generic feeling at times. I still find the visuals of New Era more powerful than Cinderella Grey's. They have a greater emotional range with stronger depictions of vulnerability. Cinderella Grey does have a lot of impactful imagery, bringing a very specific kind of hype energy with its Kill la Kill style of screen covering text and impact sound effects and such. But while I'm a sucker for this kind of presentation, the overall depiction of characters especially just doesn't speak to me much more than being cool to look at. This emphasis on the cool factor can also at times harm the storytelling. When we're first introduced to Oguri Cap, through both visuals and dialogue, they make sure at every opportunity to make it clear that she's built different. They focus on how her extra flexible legs give her an advantage, how she has a unique running form, how powerful her footsteps are, and show her absolutely smoking her classmates in races. It's obvious that she's a cut above. She's made out to be this monster among mere mortals. That undermines the ability to build tension in the first half of season 1 though. It feels like they have to find excuses for Oguri to lose in the early races, and it's a bit unsatisfying. She loses because her shoes are in bad shape, or she can't participate because she doesn't have the proper paperwork, not because she faces a real challenge. This impression undermines some of the early storyline. While still in Kasamatsu, Oguri's main rival is Fujimasa March. It is made clear from the very beginning that this isn't going to be much of a rivalry. Even if you're going into the series 100% blind, the way Oguri's talent is presented makes it pretty clear she outclasses March. And if you have even the most minuscule knowledge of the real-life Oguri, you know that she's going to leave Kasamatsu. So the only remaining reason to be invested is the interpersonal drama, the most interesting of which occurs when Oguri is suddenly recruited for national races. While he knows that her talent deserves to be on a bigger stage, Oguri's trainer Kitahara is torn, also knowing that he'll lose his chance to fulfill his dream of winning the regional Tokai Derby. His indecisiveness leads him to place a decision on whether Oguri wins an upcoming race, an insensitive choice that leaves Oguri feeling betrayed. After hearing this, March also gets angry at Oguri, feeling like she's thrown away their rivalry. Eventually, Kitahara has to come to terms with what's best for Oguri and cheers her on, giving her the resolve to defeat March and move on to the national races. This section is actually pretty good, but everything interesting that happens here is something that happens around Oguri. She feels more like a passenger in a plot written around her than the hero of her own story. It doesn't help that she's so OP, the stakes feel undermined. That eventually changes after Oguri reaches nationals though. It's a bit strange for nearly everything that's been built up around the characters to be abandoned mid-season for a new setting, but in this case, it works. Oguri's bittersweet separation from her friends, rivals, and trainer throws off any sense of stability. She suddenly goes from being a big fish in a small pond to being surrounded by new competitors, the most important being Tamamo Cross. Tama is the newest star racer on the national stage and is on a winning streak when she meets Oguri Cap. In their first race together, the Fall Tenosho, Oguri takes her first decisive loss at Tama's hands. No excuses, no technicalities, she was simply outclassed. From this point, suddenly everything starts to fall into place. Oguri has a clear, challenging goal to aim for, overcoming a new rival. As the plot continues and we're introduced to an increasing cast of unique and skilled Umas, things just get more and more engaging. The further I got into Cinderella Grey, the more I enjoyed it. It's unlike any of the other Umamusume series, instead leaning on the familiar trappings of shonen manga, which I think makes it the easiest for a newcomer in the franchise to digest. With the presentation and storytelling combined, Cinderella Grey is immensely watchable, and from the atmosphere to the fact that it's the only anime in the series to not have an idol song sung by the cast as an opening, it stands uniquely within the franchise. Though season 1 just wrapped up, the story so far only covers about half of Oguri's career, and there is plenty of setup for future arcs. I'm excited to see what Super Creek and Inari 1 end up bringing to the table down the line. Also, I hear there's an Umamusume with a dreadlock tail that shows up late in the story, and that's fucking sick. Truly visionary stuff. I can't wait. And with that, I think we're done here, finally. Honestly, this isn't even close to all of my thoughts on the series, but unfortunately, I'm all uma'd out. I've been rewatching and picking apart Horse Girls for so long now, I'm borderline losing my grip on reality. Cygames has created a series that, while not always excellent, reaches heights I would never have expected when I first heard about it years ago. The more you watch, the more things begin to crystallize into something more than any one individual series can convey. And when a story doesn't quite work by itself, the ways it connects to another series leaves both feeling more significant in the grand scheme of the franchise. Cinderella Grey shows how Oguri Cap would influence the rules of the URA, allowing Opera O to run in the classic races and Road to the Top. And Opera O's career culminates in her final boss status and beginning of a new era. And when you tie it all to real-life knowledge, it comes together even more. When Agnes Tachyon or Silent Suzuka return back to the track, where their real-life counterpart failed to do the same, it almost feels as if they've overcome fate. Through the power of storytelling, it's as if they've rejected the bounds of our reality. Just like how a meta-narrative evolves around individual characters, these series, even with as loose of a connection as they have, tie together to create a whole greater than the sum of their parts. Together, the stories almost start to feel like a collection of myths or legends, where reality is taken and embellished into something simultaneously entertaining and inspirational. In the short term, I'm sure they'll be announcing a second season of Cinderella Grey, but in the long term, I'm excited to be introduced to new stories told in new ways. I can't say how long Cygames will be able to maintain the appeal of the series, but as they add new pieces to the tapestry of the Umamusume universe, if it's anything like what they've done so far, I'll definitely be there for whatever new legend they have in store.